there is a solution out there of sorts. And by the way, it's produced more gas in the United States, drill, baby, drill. But in the short term, what we are doing, Buck, is we are paying for Ukraine to fight against Russia, billions of dollars. And we are simultaneously putting billions of dollars into the pockets of the Russian regime of Vladimir Putin, because we are paying for the resistance of Ukraine while still buying, to a large extent, Russian oil. And that is true for many different Western democracies. And so there has become the discussion and the decision, how do we replace Russian oil so that we're not effectively paying both ends of this conflict, both Ukraine and Russia? And there appear to be, you tell me if you can think of additional ones, but there appear to be 5 primary ways in which we could increase the amount of oil that we are able to get from supplier nations. The best option is for the United States to go into overdrive. I would argue that there's probably even a strong argument to be made that we should be incentivizing the oil production in the United States, because we would rather incentivize U.S. corporations and U.S. dollars than we would give them to other places. So the United States, to me, is a clear number one. I think the clear number two, and the Biden administration, unlike the Trump administration, has tried to isolate Saudi Arabia in many ways. Of the petrol states that can produce a ton of oil and gas, Saudi Arabia seems to be the second best option. But the Biden administration has had a poor relationship, I think it's fair to say, with Saudi Arabia. Third best option, and it drops off significantly here to me, Venezuela. Fourth is Iran. And the fifth best option is Russia. So we can't do Russia. Would you agree in general, Buck, that those are the 5 major options that we have? And we're driven to a situation now because the Biden administration will not embrace the fulsome production of oil and gas in the United States, such that we are going to other countries and trying to amend, repair relationships that have been poor in order to try to drive down the price of oil.
Well, let's think about the implication. Yes, I mean, the ranking of how this will go, Clay, and what states have additional capacity. You know, traditionally, we've always gone to the Saudis and OPEC saying, please use more of your capacity, right? OPEC is a cartel. We all know it, so they control the price, but we also sometimes ask them to do things to help bring the price down. Venezuela was producing at its height. I think it was it's essentially producing 10% now. I think it was about 3 or 4 million barrels a day back in the 90s, and now it's between 3 and 400,000 barrels a day, something like that. So Venezuelan production is down substantially, and there are sanctions on Venezuela because it is it's actually not even just a petro state; it's a narco state. If you look at the Treasury sanctions against senior Venezuelan officials for drug trafficking, It's a socialist hellhole, as we all know. But now we're in a situation where we're going to turn to them, perhaps. Or
we
even
don't even
Iran.
recognize the president, by the way. Maduro, we've tried to argue he's not the legitimate president for years. And now we're showing up in Venezuela and we're like, hey, oh, by the way, hey, Maduro, sorry about that whole you didn't deserve to be president thing. We need your gas, right? Like, that's where we are with Venezuela, which is a mess in and of itself.
Here we go. So here's Pete Buttigieg last week when he's asked specifically about Iranian oil, which might even get people's attention more than oil coming, asking for a change in the sanctions regime with Venezuela so we can start buying Venezuelan crude. Here's what the transportation secretary said.
Could the president possibly consider authorizing the Keystone Pipeline, working something out with Iran?
Look, the president has said that all options are on the table, but we also need to make sure that we're not galloping after permanent solutions to immediate short-term problems where more strategic and tactical actions in the short term can make a difference, like what you have with the strategic reserve, which exists partly in order to respond to situations like this.
So we have him not saying no because they are thinking perhaps about this as a possibility. Because mind you, Clay, while all this is going on, Biden administration is trying to push for a new Iran nuclear deal because the Obama-Iran nuclear deal was so great. They're going to do a deal that gives Iran even more of what it wants. Meantime, this just actually broke on the Washington Examiner website, WashingtonExaminer.com. At least 2 Iranians belonging to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Covert Action Quds Force have been plotting to assassinate former National Security Advisor John Bolton, according to a Justice Department official with direct knowledge of the investigation. The source tells the Washington Examiner the department possesses indictable evidence against Iranians, but the Biden administration officials are resisting publicly indicting the men for fear it could derail their drive for a nuclear deal with Iran, currently nearing completion in negotiations in Vienna, Austria. So, I mean, just to give everyone a full sense, I think you got that story breaking on Washington Examiner right now. Give everyone a full sense.
By the way, does John Bolton even have security? I mean, I'm like, if I'm John Bolton, I'm like, Iran's trying to kill me? I mean, it's not like he has Secret Service protection. I mean, that's not a guy, you're talking about assassinating any American former official. That is obviously should be, I think, a red line of, I mean, we were just talking about this last week when Lindsey Graham said somebody needs to kill Vladimir Putin, and we actually said, what if our adversaries were trying to kill government officials of America? The fact that they're trying to cover this up is not good. But John Bolton, I wouldn't think would have even that much security around him, which is alarming too, meaning it could be somewhat successful. It's not like he's followed by a cadre of Secret Service agents.
And yet, just goes to show you this whole situation, the Biden view on, and the Democrats, forget the Biden view. Biden doesn't know where he is sometimes. The Democrat administration, the Democrat general view on all this stuff is somehow oil from America, more oil from America bad.
Yes.
Oil from Venezuela, Iran, wherever right now good, because our oil, there's something wrong with it. It's the same carbon emission, folks. Same stuff going into the air,
That's exactly
which is
right.
not a problem anyway, but put that aside for a second. Same CO2 emissions. But they would just rather us not, because we have to lead on climate change, Clay. I want everyone to remember that when they're filling their tank with $5.50, $6 a gallon gasoline. Oh, it's for leading on climate change.
And let's not understate what's happening here. We are taking American dollars and we are giving them to authoritarian petrol state people, by and large, who hate America. So we are enabling them to be more effective in their governance because they have more money to distribute, and it is American dollars that are being distributed. And this is infuriating, I know, to many of you, because we should have created an opportunity for ourselves to be producing the full amount that we possibly can in the United States. But as you point out, Buck, this is where Democrats have played themselves, right? They've painted themselves into a corner where they're, in order to continue to make their climate change lunatics happy, they have to now give money to Venezuela, Iran, Russia. Saudi Arabia is the best of the bad options, but over their relationship with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, I believe, relating to the killing of a Washington Post journalist, they basically have isolated Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has not been inclined, even though Saudi Arabia has traditionally had decent relationships of all of these countries that we're talking about with the United States, they haven't been inclined to increase production at all. So as oil skyrockets to $130, as people are paying closer and closer to $5 a gallon for gas everywhere, that money is going directly into America's enemies' pockets because we're making the conscious decision not to produce as much as possible in the United States.
And this all comes from a belief, just remember this, that the Green New Deal is not insane, that the world is going to end unless we have a massive reduction, not just in carbon emissions, but in modern lifestyles, folks. I mean, the amount of wealth destruction that it would entail to actually meet the targets that we're never going to meet, but they're going to whine about it anyway. What, because Greta Thunberg said, how dare you? We're all supposed to change how trillions of dollars of economic activity occur. This is completely insane. It's absolutely absurd. But the Biden base won't allow him to go back on this. I mean, here's even Chris Christie, who's saying that straight up, this is domestic Democrat politics are what's making this energy issue so incoherent.
You got to do two things at the same time, and you should be able to. You have to ban Russian oil, and you have to increase domestic production. And that is where Joe Biden's going to have the problem, because he's held captive by the environmental left. That what John Kerry, his guy, said last week that the real tragedy of Ukraine is it's slowing our efforts on climate change. That will summarize what the far left's view is about domestic oil production.
He's right, Clay. I mean, these people are hardliners. They're like climate Bolsheviks. They're not a majority, not even close. They're maybe 5 to 10% of the country, but they're incredibly loud, they're well-funded, and they're very influential, and they're absolutely nuts.
Well, what this shows us, too, and we probably should continue to talk about this during the course of the show, is so much of what we are concerned about in the United States on a day-to-day basis really doesn't matter. When you look at what's going on in Ukraine, when you look at the threats of Russia, we get obsessed with things that aren't actually helpful in any way. And one of these is the idea of a hoped-for future where fossil fuels have a smaller and smaller role in the world versus a reality right now where every single person who's filling up their car or truck or SUV is paying a default massive tax increase because of our American energy policy, which is broken right now.
We are now in very active discussions with our European partners about banning the import of Russian oil to our countries, while, of course, at the same time maintaining a steady global supply of oil. The actions we've taken to date have already had a devastating impact on the Russian economy. We see the ruble in free fall. We see the economy heading into a deep recession. We've already had a major impact. But we are looking, again, as we speak, in coordination with allies and partners, at this prospect of banning oil imports.
Banning oil imports. The U.S. and NATO banning Russian oil imports. This will be interesting. Welcome back to Clay and Buck. Understand, first off, is it oil and gas, or is it just oil? That actually makes a difference. The European states, notably Germany, gets, I think, 10% of its gas from Russia, oil from Russia, but something like 30 to 40% of its natural gas from Russia. So the devil is in the details, as always. But, Clay, I think we could be in a remarkable situation in a sense here, because they're talking about doing this. I mean, if they pull the trigger on that, so to speak, if they actually sanction the Russian energy sector, what we're talking about here with almost all-time record. Now, I know it's not I don't think that's adjusted for inflation, but still, I mean, the fact that we're at near an all-time high for national-level gas prices is pretty remarkable for this moment. But here they are saying they might actually take the next step of sanctioning the Russian energy sector. And if they go after banks that do business with the Russian energy sector, that's the real nuclear option, so to speak. The economy is going to get really ugly in this country. And it does. I think it makes us sit around and ask this question. Is that something the American people really want? I mean, are they willing? Do the American people want those who represent them in government right now to drive the price of oil up to 180, 200, whatever? Who knows? $200+ a barrel.
This is the question we asked that I thought was so fascinating in general. What is the amount where Americans are willing to pay in order to fight effectively an economic war in Ukraine? Now, remember, Joe Manchin came out, senator from West Virginia, and said, I'm willing to pay an extra dime in order to be able to help Ukraine. Well, according to the Gas Buddy website, Greg, one of our researchers here and workers on the show, said that last week's rise in gas prices was the second largest weekly jump ever. It rose nearly 41 cents across the nation in the last 7 days. The only time that it has been a more rapid increase in a week, 49 cent per gallon increase. And some of you will remember this. That happened back when Hurricane Katrina in 2005 shut down oil production in the Gulf of Mexico. So what we have seen in the last 7 days, it's not your imagination. It is one of the largest increases in gas prices in a week that has ever occurred in the history of the United States. 41 cents, only one higher, 49 cents.